HOA blocked my car over a $79 fine. Until they learned my real job, they thought they could trap me in my own driveway. Over $79. A number so small, but a humiliation so big, the president smiled like she had won. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. Whispers grew louder, ... and then, when she thought she had all the power, I showed her something that made her knees shake. And in that moment, everything changed forever. Welcome back to Beyond HOA, where I share the stories that prove. Sometimes the quiet suburbs hold the loudest battles. My name is Daniel. I live in a neighborhood that looks peaceful from the outside. Green lawns, ... painted fences. Smiling faces, but under that fake perfection, the HOA rules with fear, and fines and me ... Well, I'm just a homeowner like everyone else here. At least, that's what they thought until the day they blocked my car over $79 and learned the truth about who I really am. The morning felt normal. The air was quiet, too quiet. Birds on the fence. Sprinklers ticking on the lawn. A paperboy riding past with his headphones on, but in the middle of that calm street. Something was wrong. Right at the end of my driveway stood the HOA president, her arms folded. Her lips curled into a smile that wasn't a smile. The kind of smile that says I win, you lose. And behind her, a massive pickup truck blocked my car in my own driveway, my own property. Sealed like a prison. Shelley could feel neighbors peeking from behind curtains, one by one. Blinds moved. Shadows shifted. Everyone wanted to see the show and all of this. Over $79. She held a piece of paper in her hand, crisp, folded, official. Her eyes darted between the paper, my car, and my face, like she had been waiting for this very moment. Waiting to humiliate me. Waiting to make an example out of me. Stepped closer. Good morning, I said softly. She didn't reply. Just raised the paper higher. You can't move your car today, she said finally, her voice calm, too calm. Like she had practiced this speech in front of a mirror. Not until this is paid, I looked at the paper. Red letters. Bold. An angry outstanding fine. $79. Oh, I almost laughed. Almost, but the way she stood there, shoulders straight, chin high. It wasn't about the money. It was about power. The HOA loved these little games. Late fees. Violation notes. Threats of liens. They wanted us to believe they controlled everything, from the length of our grass, to the color of our shutters, to when we could park in our own driveway. But blocking my car, that was new. Even for them I could see the toe. Truck driver leaning against his hood, chewing gum, bored, but ready. Like this wasn't his first time watching the HOA pull a stunt like this. I could hear whispers from across the street. Mrs. Jenkins, the neighbor who never missed a chance to gossip. She finally caught him. She said, caught me. As if I was a criminal, as if I had stolen something from the community, when all I had done was question them. I remembered the letters. The first one said I owed $79 for late dues, but I had proof. I paid a bank slip, a digital receipt. I mailed them a copy. They ignored it. Then came another letter, this time bolder, warning me of consequences. Then another final notice. And now, this blockade in my driveway. It wasn't about the money. It was about breaking me down, making me bow my head, sign their papers, admit guilt. I didn't carry. I stood there for a long moment. The president's smile never moved. She thought she had won. She thought she had trapped me, but I wasn't like the others in this neighborhood. I wasn't someone they could push around with letters and threats. I had seen worse. I had faced stronger enemies than this suburban queen with a clipboard, and if only she knew who I really was, she would never have parked that truck in front of my car. Looked at her again. Her eyes glistened with victory. Her fingers tapped the paper, waiting for me to fold, waiting for me to pull out my wallet, waiting for me to give her what she wanted. Most control, but I just stood there, silent, calm, because I knew something she didn't know, something that would turn this entire street upside down. The neighbors kept watching, some whispering, some recording on their phones. One kid even laughed quietly until his mother pulled him back inside. The show was getting bigger. The street was turning into a theater, and I was the main act. But here's the thing. I didn't write this script. The HOA did, and they were about to regret it. The president leaned closer. "You know the rules," she said. "Pay or stay." She almost whispered it, like a villain in a cheap movie. Her perfume stung the air, sharp, fake. Heavy Eye smiled this time, a slow smile, one that made her flinch just a little, because I wasn't scared, not even close. "Are you sure about that?" I asked softly, her forehead wrinkled for the first time. She looked uncertain. The neighbors leaned in closer, even from a distance. They wanted to hear. The tow truck driver straightened his arms, curious now, like he had a feeling something was about to happen. And in that quiet moment, with the entire neighborhood holding its breath, I thought to myself, what happens when the one person you think you control turns out to be the one person who controls you? I always knew this neighborhood was strange. It looked perfect on the outside, every lawn trimmed, every flower bed neat, every mailbox painted the exact same shade of dull gray. But perfection was never natural here. It was forced, written into rule books and shoved into our faces. The HOA loved their rules more than life itself. Grass could not grow taller than 3 inches. Christmas lights had to come down by January 2nd. Mailboxes had to stand at exactly 4 feet, not an inch higher, not an inch lower. I once saw them measure a neighbor's trash can placement with a tape measure, and yes, they fined him for leaving it 3 inches too close to the street. They called it standards. I called it madness, and $79 was just the newest excuse according to them. My fee payment was late, but I had the receipt, stamped and signed. They ignored it because the truth was, they didn't want the money. They wanted obedience. I remembered the day the first letter came, a plain white envelope with bold black letters, notice of violation. My hands shook for a second, not out of fear, but out of disbelief. I had lived through real battles, dealt with real enemies, and here I was, being threatened by a group of neighbors with clipboard. Letter said I had 30 days to pay. I sent proof. I already had. They said it wasn't good enough. Then another letter came, read this time, angrier, louder. 30 days turned into 15. 15 turned into 7. And then the final letter, taped to my door like a scarlet mark of shame. That's when I realized this was never about money. This was about breaking me, making me bow to them like everyone else. Dee Dee saw it happen before. The old man across the street, Mr. Harris, he planted roses in his front yard, red and wild, because his late wife loved them. The HOA said they weren't approved plants, he argued. Showed them letters, begged them to let the roses stay within weeks. They threatened him with thousands in fines, and one morning, his roses were gone, cut down in silence. His front yard left bare. He never smiled again after that day. Or the single mom 2 houses over. She worked double shifts, barely made it home before dark. She missed one HOA fee. Just one, and they plastered her name in the community newsletter. For everyone to see, delinquent resident, like she was a criminal. For being late one time, she cried on her porch that night. I never forgot that sound, so when they came after me, I knew what this was. Not business, not money, but power. And standing there, with my car trapped in my own driveway, I felt the weight of every petty rule pressing against me. The president smiled because she thought she was untouchable. She thought the rules gave her armor, but rules are only as strong as the people who enforce them, and she didn't know. Who? She was really up against. The tow truck rumbled as the driver started the engine, not moving yet, just letting the sound fill the street like a warning. The neighbors drew closer to their windows, hungry for drama. Even the kids had their noses pressed to the glass. This was better than any TV show, and in a way, they were right. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was a theater, a battle between power and pride, played out in front of an audience. I looked around at all those faces in the shadows. Some scared, some curious, some enjoying every second, and I realized something. They all wanted to see what I would do next. Would I break like Mr. Harris? Would I beg like the single mom? Or would I do something none of them expected? I took a slow breath. The president tapped her paper against her palm, impatient. Now the tow truck roared again, louder this time. She thought she had written the ending to this story already, but I was just getting started, because deep down, I wasn't afraid of their rules. I had lived my life enforcing rules, and if anyone here knew how rules could be bent, twisted, or broken, it was me's. Oh, I stood still, calm, collected, and I whispered to myself, this isn't their game anymore. It's mine. And as her smile began to fade, just a little, I thought of a question that still lingers in my mind even today. What happens when the people who love rules the most finally meet someone who knows how to break them better than anyone else? The letters were just the beginning, warnings, fines, empty threats on paper, but paper burns easily. And they knew it, so the HOA decided to step out of the shadows and into my life. It started small. A bright orange notice taped to my front door, the kind you can't miss, even if you try bold words across the top. Violation, as if my home, my life, had become their property. I tore it down without reading it fully. But the next morning, there was another, and the morning after that, another still, each one more aggressive, each one louder than the last. By the end of the week, my door looked like a bulletin board. Every neighbor walking past could see it. It wasn't about informing me anymore. It was about shaming me. The whispers grew louder. Why doesn't he just pay? Maybe he's broke. Maybe he thinks he's better than us. And I knew. That's exactly what the HOA wanted. Divide and conquer. Turn neighbor against neighbor. Make me the villain in my own street. Then came the phone calls, not polite reminders, not friendly voices, but cold recordings, automated threats. Failure to comply will result in legal action. Your account is past due, even though I had already sent them proof. Over and over again. The final straw was the certified letter delivered by hand, signed with authority. If payment is not received within 7 days, your vehicle will be towed at owner's expense. That was their escalation. That was their big move, and true to their word. The truck showed up loud, heavy, growling like a beast outside my house. The driver didn't even look at me at first. He was there for a job, paid to follow orders. But even he must have felt the tension in the air, because his hands shook when he unhooked the chains from the back. The president stood nearby, arms folded like a queen watching her soldiers march. Her smile was thin, but her eyes sparkled with victory. This was the moment she had been waiting for. I walked out slowly. Neighbors pretended to water their lawns. Others peeked from windows, phones in hand, recording every step, waiting for me to break. The driver nodded to me, half apologetic. Nothing personal, he muttered, but it was personal. All of it was. This was never about a late fee. This was about breaking me in front of everyone. I knew. The sound of the tow truck engine rattled my bones. It wasn't moving yet. But the threat was alive. They weren't bluffing anymore. They were going to block my car. They were going to trap me, and then tow it away if I resisted. The absurdity of it all made me laugh under my breath. $79? All this chaos? Over $79, I turned to the president. Her eyes met mine, sharp and cold. She raised the paper in her hand again. "This is your last chance," she said. Her voice was steady. But I saw it, the flicker of doubt, the smallest crack in her perfect mask, because I wasn't reacting like the others, and I wasn't panicking. I wasn't begging. I wasn't rushing to grab my wallet or write a check. I was calm. Too calm, and that terrified her more than anger ever could. I stepped closer. "So this is how you want it?" I asked softly. She stiffened, trying to hold her ground. "This is how it has to be," she said. Her words trembled at the edges. The tow truck driver coughed. Awkward now, the neighbors leaned even closer. The whole street felt like it was waiting. Waiting for me to explode. Waiting for me to surrender. Waiting for the ending they thought they already knew. But endings aren't written until... I say they're written. The truck roared again. The chains clanged against metal. The smell of oil and exhaust filled the air. Every second stretched like an eternity. The president's smile faltered just a little more. And I thought to myself, if they wanted escalation, if they wanted a war, they had just chosen the wrong enemy. I glanced once more at the paper in her hand, at the bold red letters screaming about a debt I didn't owe, and I realized this wasn't escalation for me, this was escalation for them, because every move they made, every threat they threw at me, brought them one step closer to a mistake they couldn't erase, and I was ready. Ready to make sure that mistake cost them everything. The silence after the truck engine cut off was deafening. Everyone waited. Everyone wanted to see what I would do. I had only one thought in my mind. How far was the HOA willing to go before they finally realized they had gone too far? The sun was brighter that morning, but the air felt heavier. As if the street itself knew something ugly was about to happen, I walked outside, keys in my hand, ready to leave for work, ready to start my day. But instead of freedom, I found prison. My driveway was no longer mine. A massive HOA pickup truck sat across it, blocking every inch. The kind of truck that screamed power, dominance, intimidation. Its engine still humming. Faint vibrations rumbling through the concrete beneath my shoes. I stopped mid-step. And there she was, the president, standing tall beside the truck, arms crossed, lips curved into that same uneasy smile. The smile that wasn't a smile at all. It was victory. Cold and smug, she waved the paper in her hand like a trophy, her eyes shining as if she had already won. "Not today," she said softly. "You're not going anywhere until this is paid." Her voice carried across the street, loud enough for the neighbors hiding behind curtains, clear enough for the whispers. To grow stronger, they wanted a show, and she was ready to give them one. I glanced at the truck again. It wasn't just blocking my car. It was caging me in heavy tires sunk into the edge of my lawn. Chains dangled from the back, already uncoiled, like they were waiting to wrap around my tires. The tow truck driver leaned against his hood, chewing gum, watching like it was entertainment. The absurdity of it all made me laugh. Quietly, to myself, $79, they were willing to block me, embarrass me, even risk the law, all for $79. But I wasn't surprised, because I knew the truth. This was never about the money. This was about control. The president stepped closer, her perfume sharp in the morning air. Her smile stretched wider. Though her eyes twitched with nervous energy, she wanted me angry. She wanted me desperate. But I gave her nothing. "Your car isn't leaving this driveway until you comply," she said. She tapped the paper with her finger, like each tap was a nail. In the coffin she thought she was building for May tilted my head, studying her. Her hands trembled just slightly. Maybe from excitement, maybe from fear, but she masked it well, standing like she owned the street behind her. I saw blinds shift. Mrs. Jenkins again. peeking from her window, a phone in her hand, recording everything across the road. Two kids whispered, pointing at the truck, their eyes wide. The whole neighborhood was awake now. The whole neighborhood was watching, and the president loved it. She thrived on the audience, on the whispers, on the gasps, on the power. For her, this wasn't just punishment, it was theater. She leaned closer, her voice low, almost like a hiss. You think you can play games with us? You think the rules don't matter? Not here. Not under my watch. Her watch, as if the entire neighborhood was her kingdom. As if she owned not just the lawns and mailboxes, but the people. Toei stayed calm, too calm, and that bothered her more than anything, because the truth was, she had no idea who she was standing against. To her, I was just another homeowner, another name on her list, another victim to shame in front of neighbors. But what she didn't know was that her little game had just crossed into mine. The tow truck engine roared suddenly, loud and sharp. The driver climbed in, ready to make his move. The sound shook the air, rattling the windows, echoing down the cul-de-sac. Neighbors flinched. Dogs barked. Children gasped. The president raised her hand like a queen commanding her soldier. Do it, she said. Hook it up. Hook it up. Over $79. Hook it up. Over a fine? I didn't know hook it up, because she needed to prove she was in control. Driver hesitated, his eyes flicking to me. He wasn't sure he could feel it too, the tension that filled the air like a storm waiting to break. I stepped closer to the truck, closer to her, closer to the line. She thought I would never cross her. Smile twitched again, her confidence cracked just slightly, because in that moment, she realized I wasn't afraid. Not of her rules, not of her truck. I leaned in, my voice calm, quiet, but sharp enough to cut through the noise. Are you sure you want to do this? The words hung in the air like smoke. The driver froze, the president blinked, and the neighbors pressed even closer to their windows. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. For the first time, she looked uncertain. For the first time, the power she worshipped didn't look so strong. The silence stretched, heavy, suffocating, and all I could think was, what happens when the person you're trying to cage turns out to be the one person who holds the key to the entire neighborhood? She thought she had won. The HOA president stood tall, chin lifted, her smile stretched across her face like a banner of victory. Neighbors peeked from every corner, soaking in the drama, phones in hands, whispers spreading like wildfire. And me, standing calm in the middle of it all, was almost funny, because what she didn't realize was that every second of her triumph was also her downfall. Every smirk, every word, every act of humiliation was building a stage, not for me, but for her. She waved the fine notice in front of me again. $79, she said loudly, making sure everyone heard. Her voice carried across the street, sharp and smug. Pay it, or stay right where you are. Her audience gasped. Softly, some laughed, some frowned, but all of them watched. That was the irony. She thought she was embarrassing me, but in truth, she was only exposing herself. The truck blocked my driveway like a fortress. Its chains rattled, its engine grumbled, its weight pressed down on the pavement. The driver shifted uneasily in his seat. He wasn't sure anymore. Even he could sense it. Something was wrong. Something didn't fit. The president didn't notice. Or maybe she didn't care. She was drunk on power, blind to anything but her victory. She looked at me like a hunter staring at prey, but I wasn't prey. And she was about to learn that. I glanced at the neighbors' faces pressed against glass, hands covering mouths, eyes wide with anticipation. They thought they were watching me lose, but they were actually watching her trap herself. The irony of it all made me smile, a slow smile, one that made her twitch for just a moment, because she wasn't used to smiles in these moments. She was used to fear, anger, tears, but not calm, never calm. I stepped closer, closing the space between us. Her perfume filled the air again. Too sweet, too strong, like she was trying to mask the stench of arrogance. $79, I repeated softly. That's what this is all about? Her smile tightened. Yes, she snapped. Rules are rules. Everyone follows them. You are no exception. Rules are rules. The irony burned in my chest because I had spent my entire life with rules. I knew them better than anyone else here. I knew how fragile they really were, how easily they could be twisted, bent, broken. And she, standing there with her clipboard, crown, believed they made her invincible. I looked her dead in the eyes and whispered just loud enough for her to hear, "You really have no idea who you're dealing with, do you?" Her smile faltered, just a flicker, but I saw it the tow truck driver leaned forward in his seat. Curious now, the neighbors leaned closer to their windows. The street held its breath. I let the silence hang, because silence is power too. And in that moment, the balance shifted. She thought she was in control, but her audience was no longer watching me. They were watching her, watching every twitch, every crack, every sign that her confidence was slipping. The irony was sharp. Beautiful. She wanted me to be the example, but she had made herself the example instead. I could see it in the faces of my neighbors. Some looked confused, some looked uncomfortable, some even looked a little glad, because deep down, they hated her too. They hated the rules, the fines, the threats, but they never had the courage to say it. Now they didn't have to, because she was saying it for them. Louder than ever, I took another step closer, close enough to see the sweat on her temple, close enough to hear the faint quiver in her breath. "You're right," I said calmly. "Rules are rules." Her smile twitched again, unsure if I was agreeing with her or mocking her. She didn't know anymore, and that was the true irony. She had built her power on rules, but the one man who understood rules better than her was standing right in front of her, calm, unshaken, smiling. The neighbors kept watching. Phones kept recording. The story was writing itself in their eyes, and every page was inked with irony. The tow truck rumbled again. Chains clattering. The driver looked restless, as if he wanted someone to tell him what to do, but no one did, because now even he was caught in the theater of it all. And he didn't want to miss the ending. The president tried to steady herself. "You think this is a joke?" she hissed. "This is the law of this neighborhood. We run this place. We decide what happens here." Her voice was louder now, sharper, desperate to regain the stage. But desperation is weakness, and weakness is contagious. The neighbors saw it. The driver saw it, and she felt it. The irony deepened. The queen of rules, undone by her own obsession with them, and me, still calm, still steady, still smiling, because I knew something she didn't, something that would change this entire game in a heartbeat. The irony was about to turn into revelation, and when it did, nothing in this neighborhood would ever be the same again. The street was frozen. The president still clutching her clipboard like a sword, the tow truck groaning in its idle hum, and me, still calm, still smiling. The silence was heavy. Every neighbor leaned in, waiting for something to happen. They expected me to crack, to explode, to shout. That's what most men would do under pressure. But I didn't. I just stood there, quiet, letting the tension crawl under her skin. She hated it. Her eyes darted. Her fingers tightened on the clipboard. Her smile began to fracture. Because control wasn't hers anymore. It was mine. "You're wasting everyone's time," she said finally, her voice sharper than before. "Pay the fine or deal with the consequences. Those are your only options." Her words cut through the air, but they didn't land on me. They landed on the neighbors, on the truck driver, on everyone who was witnessing her desperation. She thought she was forcing me into a corner, but really, She was standing in one herself. I took a slow breath, then stepped closer. My boots pressed against the edge of my own driveway, the truck looming like a barrier between me and my home. I tilted my head slightly, looking at her not with anger, but with disappointment. "Is this really what you think leadership looks like?" I asked quietly. The question wasn't for me. It wasn't even for her. It was for the crowd. Her face twitched. The neighbors whispered. The truck driver shifted. For the first time, the power wasn't hers. It was slipping, piece by piece, falling into the cracks of her own arrogance. "Tried again, louder this time. You don't get to question how this works. We enforce the law here. We decide who belongs and who doesn't. You don't belong?" I cut in softly. The words silenced her mid-sentence. Because I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't moved. But the way I said it, it was enough to rattle her. Her lips pressed tight, her chest rising and falling faster now. The neighbors weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at her, judging her, questioning her. The irony was complete. She wanted to humiliate me. But it was her humiliation on display. And then, the moment came. I reached into my pocket slowly. Every head followed the movement. The air thickened, hearts raced. Her eyes widened slightly, a flash of nerves breaking through her mask. Was it money? Was I finally giving in? Was I about to admit defeat? My fingers wrapped around it, cool metal, smooth edges. And when I pulled it out, the street gasped. It wasn't money. It wasn't a wallet. It was a badge, the golden reflection caught. The sunlight gleaming for everyone to see. The neighbors froze. The truck driver's jaw dropped. The president. Her smile vanished completely. Chief of police. The words stamped clear across the metal. I didn't say anything at first. I just let them look. Let the truth sink in. The irony had turned into revelation. The man she thought she could bully, fine, humiliate, was the very person who enforced laws far beyond her little clipboard kingdom. The silence cracked like glass. A neighbor gasped. Someone muttered, "Oh, my God." And the truck driver shut off the engine instantly, stepping out of the cab like a soldier who had just realized he was standing on the wrong battlefield. The president? She tried to speak. Her lips opened, but no words came. Her hands trembled slightly, the clipboard no longer a crown, but a shield she couldn't hide behind. Finally, I spoke. My voice calm, steady, carrying across the stunned street. "You talk about rules, about laws, about who belongs and who doesn't. But let me remind you, your authority ends at this sidewalk. Mine doesn't." Her face drained of color. The neighbors whispered louder now, some even smiling for the first time. The power she had stolen for years was crumbling in front of them. And I wasn't yelling. I wasn't threatening. I was just telling the truth. That was the reveal. That was the shift. For years she had been untouchable. But now, everyone knew the truth. She wasn't untouchable at all. The badge glittered in my hand, and with it came silence. Respect, fear. All from the same people who, minutes ago, thought I was trapped. The irony? She wanted to show everyone that she had power over me. But in reality, she had just given me the stage to show everyone that her power meant nothing. The tow truck driver looked at me nervously. "Sir, do you want me to move this right now?" he asked, voice low, respectful. I didn't answer right away. I just kept looking at the president, letting her squirm under the weight of her own mistake. Her eyes begged me not to speak. But silence was no longer her weapon. It was mine. And finally, I gave the faintest nod. The truck roared to life, gears grinding as it pulled away from my driveway, leaving behind nothing but the sound of chains clattering in retreat. The neighbors clapped quietly. Not loud, not public, but enough. Enough to show me they understood. Her empire had cracked. And she knew it. The badge still shimmered in my hand, the golden light bouncing off it, almost blinding under the late afternoon sun. For a moment, the entire neighborhood was silent, like the air itself had been sucked out of the street. The tow truck had already pulled away, the neighbors still frozen in their driveways. And the president? Standing like a statue, with fear hidden, poorly behind her eyes. That clipboard of hers no longer looked powerful. It looked like paper, thin, fragile, meaningless. I didn't need to say much. The badge spoke louder than words ever could. But something inside me wanted to finish this not for me, but for everyone who had been quietly living under her thumb. For years, I turned to face her fully. My steps were calm, measured, deliberate. Each one echoed louder than her entire clipboard kingdom. When I finally stopped in front of her, just inches away, I saw it, her hands shaking, her lips tight, her chin tilted slightly upward as if trying to cling to whatever fragments of control she thought she had left. But control was gone. She knew it. And so did everyone else. You wanted to make an example out of me. I said softly, but loud enough for every neighbor to hear. Well, congratulations, you did. Her jaw clenched. I could see the color draining from her face. But she tried desperately to hold her ground. This is not about you, she stammered. This is about following the rules. Nobody is above the law. I smiled, slow and steady. No one knows that better than me. And then I lifted the badge just a little higher, so the sunlight hit it directly. The engraving chief of police sparkled like fire. The gasps around me grew louder. Some neighbors whispered, some even chuckled quietly. But all eyes were locked. On her dot, her voice cracked when she spoke again. You can't use that against the HOA. I leaned in slightly, my voice dropping lower just for her. I don't need to use it against you. You already did this to yourself. Her breath caught. She looked down at the clipboard, then at the badge, then back at me. For once, she didn't have a comeback. And in that silence, a sound broke out, dot clapping dot. It started small from the neighbor across the street, then another, and another, until the quiet little street echoed with applause. The president's face went pale, because in that moment, she wasn't the leader anymore. She was exposed, defeated, and humiliated right in front of the very people she wanted to control. I didn't need to drag it any further. I didn't need to shout or threaten. All I did was slide the badge back into my pocket and turn my back on her dot. That was enough. The neighbors gathered closer, some patting me on the shoulder, some whispering thank you. They had all been waiting for someone to stand up to her. And now they saw her for what she really was, just a person with a clipboard and a fragile sense of power. The tow truck driver approached me sheepishly. Sir, I didn't know. I was just following the order she gave me. I nodded. I know. And now you know better. He nodded quickly, relieved, and left without another word. The president tried to slip away quietly, but the eyes of every neighbor followed her. No more admiration, no more fear. Only judgment, only disdain. Her empire had collapsed, and I hadn't. Even raised my voice. I stood in my driveway, finally free from her blockade. The air lighter, the silence almost peaceful again. For the first time in years, I felt like this neighborhood might actually breathe. And yet, even in victory, I didn't feel anger toward her. I felt pity, because power built on fear never lasts. And she had just learned that the hard way. Later, that evening, I sat on my porch, sipping coffee, watching the sunset paint the sky with colors of fire. Neighbors stopped by, one after another, sharing their own stories of how she had bullied them, fined them, embarrassed them. Each story was a reminder of why this moment mattered not just for me, but for everyone. They didn't just see me as their neighbor anymore. They saw me as the man who ended her reign. The irony still lingered. She thought she was above me because of her HOA title. But she had been standing against the one man whose title made hers irrelevant, the uneasy smile she once wore whenever. She thought she had the upper hand. Now it was gone, forever. And as the night grew darker, I couldn't help but wonder. What would she try next? Would she step down quietly? Would she fight back in some desperate attempt to regain power? Or would she finally realize her clipboard couldn't save her anymore?